Cheaters. Why did you do it? Gonna break the theme and give a real answer of the one time I did cheat on someone. Wasn't happy. Was only in the relationship because of threats of self-harm and not having the understanding and maturity to deal with it. Cared enough to say, okay, we'll work it out, and go with whatever she wanted. But the relationship itself was hell. Was asked over by another girl and thought to myself at that moment, fine, I don't care. I've already tried to break up like half a dozen times and went on over. She found out, of course, and harmed herself badly enough to get hospitalized. I told the nurse about our relationship and how I've been trying to end it, but caving to her threats of self-harm. Her parents were there too, though they were of the opinion I should just stick with her to get her through life. Nurse told me that she was only going to end up ending herself and to leave her. And honestly, that get-out-of-guilt-free card was all I needed. She passed away a few years later. Termination. I go back and forth on if the right thing to do was to stick with her and to try to be her support. Don't set yourself on fire, and yet, I don't know. I'm glad the nurse was there to give the honest answer when he needed it. Story 2. She chipped away at my self-esteem and confidence for over a year. We did the thing where we would be good for a few months and then she would break up with me for a week or two, presumably to get with some guy she liked. I knew it was the case at least one of the times. She would always make the comment when we would be having makeup intimacy, I bet this is better than doing it yourself. So basically she was saying I wasn't attractive enough to have intimacy with anyone else. So I proved her wrong and also got some of my self-esteem and confidence back, as pathetic as it sounds. I had finally had enough when she was getting ready and casually said, I think I'm too pretty for you. Kicked her out and declined any further attempts at reconciliation. Story 3. In my case, it was because I had two lovely girls of entirely different sorts coming at me at the same time, and just couldn't decide. Had two good things and couldn't let either go. Plus, I have this crippling inability to say no to a girl that's crying, causing me to fail to dump one of them. It took months until things finally came to a head, at which time I fully expected to lose them both, but one held in there. Went on with her for a few years until it fell apart due to various sob-story reasons. After that, the other one tracked me down. It picked up like nothing had happened, and that went on for a few more years. Then, I finally got my comeuppance when she cheated on me. Almost as if she'd been playing the long game for that revenge. Oh, to top it off, they were both cheating on their current boyfriends to get to me when we first met. Looking back, we were all pretty dysfunctional. Stupid, weak-willed, and fairly handsome is a recipe for heartbreak when you're young. These days, I bless have my cake and eat it too. So much as get regular beatings from the cake that's around primarily for practical reasons. To think of how much time I spent ridiculing my cheating friends before that incident and going ballistic whenever I heard of anything close to infidelity. Never saw it coming, as I always imagined it as something some men did simply to get more tail. Once you're in it, it tends to look a whole lot more complicated. Story 4. My first relationship lasted 3 years. This was all in high school. It should have lasted too. He was very mean to me, and every time I tried to break it off, things only got worse. So I lied to him and said I was staying home and then hung out with this guy who wasn't really my type, but he was nice and followed me around like a puppy dog, obsessed with me. It made me feel special. I kissed him. He found out I lied about staying home. Next time we met up, I seriously feared for my life. He kept a closer watch on me, suspecting but not knowing I had a thing for this other guy. Boyfriend 1 and I planned to have intimacy after my birthday. I couldn't explain it to him, but after bad encounters early in life, I wanted to be wiser before having consensual intimacy. I wanted to be an official adult first, as though waiting would stretch out my stolen childhood more. I thought it was stupid. It was. I still can't explain it. A few months before my birthday, my first boyfriend moved to another state. We tried long distance, his desire, not mine, but eventually things just fell apart slowly. But then the other guy had lost interest, and I was telling him I loved him. I just said it to get him to follow me around like an obsessed idiot like he used to, because it made me feel better about myself. I ended up having intimacy a few days after my birthday while I was technically still long distance dating boyfriend 1. I was not attracted to this second guy. I only had intimacy with him because I thought it would make him value me more. I knew he'd had intimacy before and he claimed to be someone's first time as well. I read that draining a lot during the first time was a myth or very exaggerated. Wrong. I started draining so much. He was like, "Ew, don't drain on my bed." So I stood up and he's like, "Don't drain on my floor either." He grabbed a paper towel from me and said with a hint of disgust he was going to take a shower. I laid in his bed with a paper towel stuffed between my legs. feeling like I wanted to cry, but all I could do was stare blankly as emotions of guilt, sadness, and disappointment washed over me. I knew your first time was never the best, but I had no idea it would go that way. A couple months later, I survived a termination attempt, which was really a wake-up call to me that I needed better people in my life or none at all. Eventually, boyfriend one and I connected again, and he told me he had his first time with someone else, so I told him about my experience also. His was not great either. He was finally going to therapy and being medicated, so I felt we could finally talk as adults. He's improved a lot. I'm very happy for him, but I told him we could not ever date again. He was still living far away and was much more meek and agreeable over text than in person. Sorry, that was long and sad, but it has a happy ending. I've been in an actual healthy relationship for a year and a half now, after learning to be comfortable on my own being single, but this guy really supports me and improves my life and brings me up when I'm down. So that's why I'm dating him. I tell him all the time how grateful I am to have him in my life. Story 5. I was incredibly immature and essentially, once I got a taste of it, cheating with another woman, I was hooked. One in particular got me hooked. I fell in love with her while trying to maintain a marriage, along with a pregnancy with my spouse. It was all bad. I got caught up, given chances to change, didn't. Spouse left with child. That love changed. Had separation time, lots of time to sit and think and live alone. Moment of clarity came. Turned life around, changed attitude, acknowledged faults and repented. Inquired another opportunity to be back in the lives of estranged wife and child. Was given opportunity with clause of, if you mess up ever again, even slight or whatever, you're done. It's been understood. Life is good. A little over a year out from reconciliation. Own home, spouse is schooling, work is good. Mind, body, and spirit are good. Baby is great, more importantly. All is better with a changed mindset. Thanking God on my end. Hate all you want. It helped me get myself in gear and better myself for the long run. The hard way. I'll never not feel terrible for what I did, but what matters now is how much more I can make up. Selflessness over selfishness any day. Thanks for reading. Story 6. We entered into the relationship under the guise of cheating and lies. She left her fiancé 5 years for me. I was in a rather odd place psychologically and had just moved to a rural area. Due to a car accident, I lost my job, source of transportation, and basically any access to the non-rural area that I was living in. Even though I was only an hour outside of a major metropolitan area, it felt like it was a continent away. She was my professor. We started gradually with her coming over to what was basically my shack in the middle of nowhere a few nights out of the week. I was in love with her. However, for me, it felt like I had made the decision out of desperation rather than as a legitimate choice. I was, still am, 6 years younger than her. The administration at the school found out about us. She lost her job and I was kicked out of school for an unrelated reason. She found another job she was more suited for. I wound up begging my grandfather for money and got a 10-year-old Prius. Naturally, I started Ubering. After a few months of Ubering and having the first taste of freedom in a very long time, I got hammered at a ride's house with him and wound up having intimacy. I get that I'm terrible. I told her what happened and she never really forgave me. She'd bring up the fact that I cheated at least twice a day. Gradually, our arguments got worse. I never really thought that I could get as angry with someone as I was with her. She didn't like me using Uber as a source of income. She kept bringing up that I cheated. Every day. There were multiple occasions where she used weapons against me. Admittedly, I was rather aggressive as well. However, I kept my hands to myself. After about 4 months of this and intense arguing, I moved in with a friend and started working for the state. She and I continued seeing each other. There was underlying paranoia on her part where she continually accused me of cheating. I loved her. She loved me. So we stayed together. After a few months of living with my friend, I moved back in with her. The fighting and the paranoia were still there. In between these bouts, we were having intimacy between 4 to 7 times a day. We would fight and then we would do it. This went on for another 5 months or so until I moved out while she was on a weekend trip to the beach. At this point, I started seeing other people. I'd been fed up with the entire situation, and the amount of guilt that I felt about having cheated on her initially kept me attached to her. I saw maybe one person a month or so, typically for a night here and there. We broke up for a month and got back together. At this point, I found myself getting jealous at the fact that she had seen other people. The first time I harmed her back, we were in a screaming contest. She had demanded the names of the people I had intimacy with. I told her who they were. I wanted to know who she'd been with, and she refused to tell me. She threw a cup on my head and started hurting me. Most of the time, I just locked my body and waited for her to stop. I have previous injuries from my time in the army. This time I'd had enough and I harmed her back. I thought that it would have stopped things. However, she just got more aggressive. Every day she'd berate me for what I'd done, how I was mistreating. The fights kept happening and kept getting worse. Most of the time she'd start the fights. As time progressed, I would start them as well. Eventually she went to the police. After reaching an agreement with the DA's office, and as I've had no other issues with law enforcement, I was given a year of supervised probation with a court-mandated anger management. I also am seeing a therapist through the VA. My job has recommended a second therapist that I see frequently as well. All of my friends and family told me to leave, as did hers. We were codependent. It's been a lot to get over. I'm still getting used to talking to women after this. Sometimes I can get pretty weird. And obviously, being charged with a crime makes things difficult to keep someone around. I've been socially ostracized, and there are certain bars in my town I can't go into now because of safe space policies. I've only got a few months left on probation, and hopefully the charges will be expunged. My lawyer seems to think so. I fully recognize what my role is in all of this. I understand I should have left after it was evident that she wouldn't be able to forgive or trust me again. I should have never let things get to the point where we were this aggressive. I was stupid. Now I'm paying for it. She's perfectly fine, and freely dating acquaintances within my social group now. It's kind of awful, actually. In the end, this whole affair probably seems unfair to him. And it is. Granted that there are two sides to every story. Anyways, on a lighter note, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 7. Serious one. S is my ex, B my cheating accomplice. Was in a long-distance relationship, and S had been ignoring or cutting short calls for a few weeks. The last time we saw each other, about 6 weeks prior, S made comments that I didn't look as good since getting really into fitness or gym life and didn't feel like having intimacy with me. I was out clubbing with my sports team, and B, who had chatted me up a week before but I blew him off, started dancing with me and told me how good I looked. My intoxicated self just thought about how unhappy I had been, and I decided I wanted to be single. So I went back to B's place and slept with him. I did it purely because I wanted to, and it was nice that someone thought I was hot. Broke up with S the next day in case you were wondering. Turns out S had slept with 7+ other people and never told me. Well, now at least she gets to move on from an unsatisfying relationship. Story 8. He cheated on me with a bunch of different girls while we were dating. I only knew about one until after I broke up with him. He asked other girls for photos and kept them on his old phone. After I caught him cheating, he started being extra sneaky and shady. He changed his password, took out my fingerprint, and I couldn't see who he got texts from his lock screen. He had a bunch of chick friends from his hometown and never told me when they were in town. He'd go hang out with them without telling me, and I found out from one of his friends. He freaked out on me for being jealous, but the girl he was hanging out with was literally all over him. We were at a football game, and I asked him to hold my blanket for me while I went to the restroom. I came out to see her wrapped up in my blanket. I did a lot of other messed up stuff and verbally mistreated me, but I could literally go on and on. Towards the end of the relationship, I had so many people tell me to dump him, but I cared about him and thought he would change. I was so fed up with his games. I started talking to a football player, and he was so nice to me. He brought me food, took me home when I didn't have a ride, and just made me feel good about myself. I went to his house one day to watch a movie. I had no intentions of cheating, and lied to my boyfriend saying I couldn't come over because I was busy with my grandma. Him and I ended up making out. He basically lunged at me and kissed me. I didn't stop him though. I felt horrible and broke up with my boyfriend the following day. It still haunts me how I did it, but he put me through so much I thought he deserved it at the time. He looked so sad and called me crying, begging for me back at 2 a.m. I didn't want to cave though and enable him to think that I was wrapped around his finger. I agreed to talk things out with him. But he was logged into Facebook on my phone, and he was already planning on having another girl sneak over to his house to fool around. I was so angry and told him I wasn't going to talk to him. He proceeded to call me on my way home and tell me how much of a witch I was and how he shouldn't have been there for me when I was having a lot of family issues. Mind you, he took my V-card and he was the only person I had slept with at the time. This is the first time I really thought about it in a while, and now a bunch of different emotions I buried are resurfacing. Story 9. It wasn't an intended malicious decision, but happened as a result of a recipe of influencing factors. I was in an emotionally mistreating marriage. I was in denial that it was time to call it quits. I was upset and vulnerable from a fight we just had. I had low self-esteem. I was living a lie. I had a mutual crush on someone that met my longing for love. I was intoxicated and had poor boundaries. I was naive, thinking he was just being friendly and wouldn't try anything. I was detached emotionally from my husband, and I was incredibly lonely. Even when I knew I was about to kiss and sleep with this man, my anger towards my husband overcame my morals. My intoxicated self thought, he's a schmuck for hurting me all these years. I deserve love. At that point, even if I hadn't kissed him yet, I had already cheated, because I was cuddling him in his bed and planned to sleep over. So I thought, who cares? It's too late now. I ended my marriage a few months later. I did what I did out of my vulnerability, for boundaries and naiveness, not because I'm a cheating schmuck. I'll never do it again and will end a relationship if I ever find myself that miserable again. I've grown from the experience, and I don't regret it. It taught me a lot and forced me to face the truth. Story 10. Because I was being an insecure piece of garbage. There were warning signs in the relationship immediately, but I stayed anyway because I thought I would eventually have to settle. He tried to sleep with my sister and I still didn't leave. Touching me was always a chore. I felt like nobody else would ever love me. I was as insecure as they come. That and I had stayed so long that I couldn't imagine leaving. I just kind of resigned myself to make the best of an unhappy situation, and I honestly have no idea why. I think it had a lot to do with my family's expectations of me. I thought they were right, and I just needed to accept my life the way it was. One day, someone showed interest and treated me nicely, and suddenly I was reminded how great it felt to want to be touched, and that was all she wrote. So ultimately, it was the insecurity and the fear of walking away for whatever reason. I left shortly after and became really happy with myself, and now I feel like a different person. I wish I would have just left as soon as I heard him complain to his mom about not doing his laundry right, but all I can do now is understand my mistake and make sure to never do it again. I understand that it wasn't his fault. He wasn't right for me. I should have just left. It was my fault for even allowing myself to get to that point. I should have known what I wanted and left when I was unhappy. Just a bad decision on my part, but one I took a lifelong lesson from for sure. Story 11. I emotionally cheated on my girlfriend of 5 years, on separate occasions. I was honest about most of them when they were earlier on and changed how I was interacting with these women before I got to what I considered emotional cheating. But there was one that I couldn't just smother away. I was honest about it, and when I told my girlfriend, her words verbatim were, "I wish you just actually cheated on me." My point with this is that I think you'll get many different kinds of people that will answer this, from the best intentions to the worst. In the end, I don't believe anyone really meant any harm or malice to their partner. Sometimes, life just throws you in situations you don't know how to handle, and you do what is best for us in that very moment. It doesn't really matter what your intentions are or whether you're hammered or sober. If you do the deed, then it is what it is. Some people would say that what I did wasn't as bad because it wasn't physical, but it didn't seem that way to her, and it is a burden I carry because I remember the look in her face and the sound of her voice every day when I think about it. Even if you don't love them, don't hurt the people you care about. Even if you only care for them a little, do what's right. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.